Dyatlov Pass incident happened exactly as the game describes it. 9 experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute went into the northern Ural Mountains in February 1959 and never came back. When search teams found their campsite...
Oh, this is the Siberia one. Oh, this is that one. Oh.
Weeks later, they discovered something that defied explanation. The tent had been cut open from the inside as if the occupants were desperate.
Oh, yeah, this is like a couple well-known hikers that knew exactly what they're doing, but like the tents were cut from like the inside. Their footprints didn't match up. There were clothes still left. So it was like, what was happening that caused these people to try to panic and get out right away? What's up, everybody? Celtic Scarecrow here, back with another reaction to get those 10s and 20 views. Today, we are reacting to a channel I have never heard of. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. This is how you find cool new channels. Sometimes the algorithm throws up a video title that sounds very interesting, and you go, okay, I'll watch that. This one is by Abyssal Gamer. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. If not, apologies. Words are hard. But the reason why it caught my attention was the title is The Most Disturbing Game Based on Real Events Iceberg. No idea what that means. It sounds interesting. I'm a big gamer. Big fan of the video games. Could I? Hold on. I'll make some alterations. There we go. I just moved myself up. Yeah, so big fan of video games. And it's like I searched through gaming history. This is the description of his thing. Of course, link to the original video will be in the comment section. This is going to be a long one. Wow, I did not realize it was an hour-long video. Well done, sir. If you did that much research. I searched through gaming history to find the most disturbing games based on real events. We're starting with the unsettling and the unusual, and then diving darker, more shocking titles and start with true crimes, tragedies, horrors, and actual events. Okay, let's make it. Nope, you pause. Alright, let's get up here. That is his channel ID. Really cool logo, dude. I really do like that. Not as adorable as Tiny, but, you know, it is still really good. Alright, so warning, make sure and flash images. Go check out the original page if you don't want me pausing, commenting, you know, the standard shtick of a reaction channel. Alright, let's... hold on, we're going to do one thing. Move you over. Right there. Okay, let's get going. Oh yeah, I did change the mouse to the creepy green.
16 video games, 7 levels. I've put together some of the most disturbing video games based on real events. We're going to open...
Oh yeah, World at War, most of the Call of Duties, you could have gone, the Call of Duty series, you could have gone Medal of Honor. Like, a lot of the war games have a lot of real events.
With a few of the more well-known games, but as we go deeper,
profile,
we'll gradually slip into the more niche, dark, and unexpected entries on our list. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Call of Duty, World at War.
Really cool thumbnail. Now, question, if you ever watch this, hi, Celtic. Did you AI generate this image or someone draw it for you? Because that is a really cool, like, iceberg with the skull underneath it. Just saying. And also, I would put level 1 at the top, and then once you get to like the really creepy stuff, you go under the water.
Call of Duty World at War is not your typical entry into the franchise. It's actually a lot darker, more intense, and authentic in its refusal to sanitize the horror of World War II.
Yeah, if you're making a game about a war game, war is not pleasant. Granted, I've never been at war, so I can never say that. I didn't join the military. Thought about it, but didn't. But yeah, World War II, especially the Pacific Theater, not pretty.
The game throws players into the Pacific and Eastern Front theaters through the eyes of U.S. Marine Raider Private C. Miller and Soviet Red Army Private Dmitry Petrenko, two perspectives that would witness humanity at its absolute worst. That's because the developers made a deliberate choice to base their campaign on some of the war's most brutal engagements, starting with the Battle of Peleliu, where Marines faced Japanese defenders who had transformed the Coral Island into a nightmare of caves and fortified positions.
I'm actually shocked they didn't do a whole level for the Sulphur Island, where it was just waves of Japanese people coming like daily.
Players began the Pacific campaign watching their fellow Marines get brutally executed by Japanese soldiers, setting the tone for what many consider the most disturbing entry in the Call of Duty series. The game
One of the best entries to the Call of Duty series, in my opinion. They took their time and actually put out a good game.
draws directly from real accounts of Japanese military conduct, where soldiers would often take their own lives rather than surrender, and prisoners faced unspeakable treatment, which is very much captured in the game.
Yeah, I want to say the Fat Electrician has the video, like the Pod Piper of Saipan or Saipan or something like that. And basically, this one guy was adopted by like Japanese immigrants, so he spoke Japanese, and he was listening to the Japanese soldiers and civilians basically say, "Do not let the Americans capture you," because they were basically evil Oni monsters that will do ungodly, horrible things to you. To the point where he like they were watching like mothers throw their kids off a cliff because they thought it'd be better for them to no longer exist than be captured by the Americans.
The Japanese viewed capture as the ultimate dishonor, leading to desperate final stands that claimed thousands of lives on both sides, and you see it. But the Eastern Front campaign was just as intense.
Coward! I understand blurring the logo, but not the word.
Dropping players into the ruins of Stalingrad, where Soviet forces pushed through some of the war's most savage urban fighting. The game's portrayal of the advance toward Berlin incorporates actual historical footage, forcing you to witness Soviet forces exacting revenge for years of occupation and atrocities. With the game
And I'm pause you right there. That's what I do here. The Soviets were on the German side and then betrayed them. Not a shock that the Germans went a little extra hard on the Soviets. Both were bad people. It's like level 4 level of hell in the Soviets and like level 9 level of hell of the Germans at that stage.
game showing how the cycle of violence consumed both armies as they fought through the rubble of German cities. So what exactly makes this more disturbing than any other war game? It is committed to historical authenticity to the end, even when that means showing players deeply disturbing content. The developers did all the usual stuff, researching the weapons, uniforms, and equipment, but they also studied the psychological warfare and extreme tactics employed by both sides. For example, the game depicts flamethrower attacks that burn enemies alive, something that actually happened throughout the Pacific Theater as...
Oh yeah, especially because like you figure the Japanese had like little tunnel systems that were hidden in the high grass. Fire gets rid of grass pretty quickly and spreads down, also takes out the oxygen, making it harder for them to breathe. Flamethrower was a highly effective weapon in that front.
Allied forces cleared Japanese positions, and something never seen before in a war game. The Battle of Berlin sequences pushed players through house-to-house fighting where desperate German defenders, including elderly men and Hitler Youth, make final stands against overwhelming Soviet forces. The game shows how the Wehrmacht and SS units fought to the bitter end, often taking their own lives rather than face capture, while Soviet troops advanced through a city that was now just piles of rocks. They basically took all the best parts of Call of Duty and pushed it to a level of authenticity that no one could possibly have seen coming. How many...
God, I would love if they would have stuck with this style of gaming. Granted, maybe not be so authentic, but could you imagine if they did like Call of Duty, the Korean War, hell, the Civil War? This style would be very fun to play, like a first-person shooter of the Civil War. Like you can still have your PvP because you have two different sides: the Americans and the Confederates. You can even have people play as like the Native Americans. That's a third avenue of it. Like if you want to go PvP angle. I mean, like this is like this style of game where it's like more realistic. That's why a lot of people like Escape from Tarkov.
Would have expected actual wartime footage or the inclusion of some of the Japanese fighters' most ruthless, inhumane techniques. It certainly made for one of the more intense Call of Duty games, that's for sure. Beholder. Beholder puts you in the role of an apartment building.
Never heard of it, so let's get. I'm not going to be able to comment as much. I know Call of Duty World War. I really like World at War. I own it. If you want me to see me play it on stream at some time, let me know. But yeah, never heard of Beholder. So let's learn and go.
Manager named Carl. Your government has installed surveillance equipment and given you the job of spying on your tenants. You must bug their apartments, rifle through their belongings when they're at work, and report anyone who might be plotting against the state. Your survival depends on betraying the people living under your roof. It's dystopian, but it's actually very real.
Oh, I can see that being Germany. I can see that being communist Russia and China. I could see that actually being the U.S. during the Red Scare. There's a lot of countries. Current England.
The developers at Warm Lamp Games, working from Siberia, Russia, built Beholder.
There it is, Russia.
After witnessing the oppressive laws introduced by the Russian government. The game mechanics...
Slavic Special Ed as HLC says. I gotta do an HLC video at some point.
Mirror real historical practices. You install cameras in apartments while tenants are away, just as the Stasi drilled tiny holes in apartment walls to film citizens. You searched through personal belongings for contraband, like how Soviet-era informants would report neighbors for owning forbidden items like Western food or books. You profile tenants based on their conversations and habits, building detailed dossiers that mirror the Stasi's extensive documentation. In case you wonder how far the Stasi went, they...
I'm already liking this guy's channel because he has that great level of detail that like, oh, it's not just like, oh, this is based off this, blah, blah, blah. It's based off this, and here's extra credit homework.
Even collected people's scents in jars for tracking purposes. In Stalin's Soviet Union,
it has to be their underwear.
people lived in communal apartments where one tenant was designated as the senior tenant, responsible for reporting suspicious activities to authorities. Neighbors would denounce each other to gain additional living space, a practice so common it earned its own term, apartment denunciation. Beholder captures that exact atmosphere by making your apartment building both a home and prison. Nobody is free to be themselves. The recruitment of informants in totalitarian states followed patterns that Beholder replicates with unsettling accuracy. East German citizens became informants for various reasons: ideological conviction, material rewards like color televisions or vacations,
to somehow be able to get to West Germany, where the, Americans with their great capitalism were.
Career advancement, or simple blackmail. The Stasi estimated that 1 in 60 East Germans was informing on others by the 1980s.
Those too close to the thing, man. It's blurry and hurt my eyes.
In Czechoslovakia, approximately 100.
That Czechoslovakia no longer exists. It's now the Czech Republic, or Czechia, and Slovakia. Czech is where Jager's from, and Slovakia is where Zdeno Chara and I think Pasternak are from. For you hockey fans.
150,000 to 160,000 people served as informants for the state.
Oh, this is also why Jager did not like Darius Kasparaitis. Russian and Czech do not like each other.
Security Service. Again, I have to stress that these people were not pro-spies. They were mailmen, store clerks, assistants, ordinary citizens maintaining their regular jobs while betraying friends, neighbors, and family members. The game forces players to confront the same impossible choices that drove real people to become informants. Do you report a tenant to protect your own family? Do you blackmail someone for money you desperately need? The historical record shows people made these calculations constantly.
Yeah, what you do to survive is crazy.
The system encouraged betrayal by making it simple and personally profitable. The game shows how easy it was to be swept up in that. The disturbing reality that Beholder illustrates is how surveillance states turn survival into complicity. East German informants often began as targets themselves, threatened.
This is also seen in the Jim Carrey movie The Majestic, where Jim Carrey's character is I want to say movie or TV producer. And his girl he liked back in college basically said that he was a communist to kind of stop her from being looked at. And it's a crazy movie, but basically during the Red Scare, people would be like, oh, you went to this party that had communist connection. Just name somebody else and we'll take you off the list. Help us find the real communists. And a lot of people did it. Majestic, also a great movie with Jim Carrey.
Blackmailed or coerced into cooperating with the state, threatening to ruin them. Many believed they were protecting loved ones by collaborating, only to find themselves deeper in the system. The game captures this trap by making every choice feel like a compromise or a risk to your safety. It's basically one giant warning reminding us that fascist totalitarian regimes don't need massive enforcement or equipment. They can convince ordinary people to police each other. Level 2. Balance of Power. Balance
Another game I'd never heard of.
of Power first shipped for the Macintosh in 1985 at the height.
Well, that definitely explains why. It's 3 years before I was born. Also, if anyone's questioning what is a Macintosh, it is the precursor to the Mac computers, which is now Apple computers.
Of the Cold War, a period so overwhelmingly tense that this tiny game ended up selling over 250,000 copies, a staggering amount for a
Maybe that game needs to come back on, Steam or something like that.
serious strategy title in that era, let alone one created by one man, designer Chris Crawford. The premise is that you play
I really applaud Chris. Made a great game, more or less by himself, sounds like.
as the U.S. President or Soviet General Secretary, steer through 8 in-game years, rack up prestige, and above all, keep mushroom clouds off the screen. When you stumble into Armageddon, you see the text, "You have ignited a nuclear war. We do not reward failure." Well, I mean, you can't. We're all dead. Chris Crawford built each turn around real-style news flashes. There's a coup attempt in Nigeria, Soviet advisors in Syria, a border skirmish in Laos. Many events that...
Holy crap, this game could go so hard right now. You look at games like Risk, Civilization Revolution, this simple game, you don't even need to upgrade, graphics. Maybe just have, clips of things that are going on, and this game would be even a mass seller right now. And you can make it U.S. versus Russia, U.S. versus Iran. You can make this a lot bigger game. Holy crap, this game would be so good these days.
were lifted straight from early 1980s wire reports. Your staff hands you 3 response buttons: ignore, issue a note, or push back with force. Hit the wrong tone and the other superpower escalates. Fail to back off, you get nuclear war. And
Also, imagine this as a PvP-ish function with your friend. granted, you'll have that one friend who always pushes to war, but like just do it so it's like just simple. Oh, this is such a good game in this day and age.
And the game simply ends. Critics at the time called it a recreation of the world's geopolitical landscape rather than entertainment, which is actually very, very accurate. Crawford's code tracked 62 separate countries, each with contemporary data on alliances, unrest, and economics. He wanted players to feel how a decision in Managua might ripple into a naval standoff in the Persian Gulf. He wanted them to understand how perilous it was to be a world leader in this situation. Crawford designed the Soviet and American AIs with what he described as credibility thresholds, tiny hidden numbers that determine how far each side will push before launching the nukes. Because those numbers shift every turn, you never really know the limit. Now, at the time, reviewers complained that was a problem, saying the computer felt faceless and unreadable.
Like a government official who's faceless and unreadable? I want this game this day and age. I want this game to be remade.
And that the whole thing was basically Russian roulette. But isn't that the point? World leaders can't fully read one another. One mistake really could doom us all. Take, for example, a single red flag crisis. In the manual, Crawford lists...
Look at the... Tell everything that's going on with Ukraine. Russia's doing, like, flyovers over, Poland or near Poland, seeing it. They're trying to test, will NATO actually do Article 5 type thing or whatever if Russia goes after a NATO country. This stuff happens even today.
Tunisia as an example. If that crisis grows and grows and both sides dig in, it can trigger the spiral into total nuclear disaster. The game teaches you that sheer geography doesn't matter. Optics do. Too weak, and they take advantage. Too strong, and they launch the nukes. The result is a queasy equilibrium where doing nothing often feels like the smartest play, in, like, reality. To make things more challenging, the game never allows preventative strikes, only reaction. You can fund insurgents, but...
I think they kind of need it. If you're going to make this game out today, you need to do that. But then again, they would have consequences. You preventively strike the wrong person, kaboom.
You cannot invade outright without immediate escalation, mirroring the real-life aversion to direct superpower clashes. Essentially, this game is the most realistic president simulator you will ever play, entirely because the world is relying on you, and you have no way of knowing what to do. Endgame.
Like I said, that game sounds fun and could be a massive hit in this day and age.
Syria. Thomas Rowlings was flicking through news shorts in late 2012 listening to political pundits argue about arming Syrian rebels. 2 weeks later, he pushed Endgame Syria onto browsers and Android devices, letting anyone try their own wartime strategies with a deck of digital cards. You can see why it was so controversial. It took just 14 days to turn a living civil war into a piece of entertainment. Booting the game drops you straight into the rebel command tent where 1 week equals 1 turn. First, there's a political phase. You have to court Turkey, charm the Gulf, or gamble on jihadi allies that boost your military firepower but cost you some global sympathy in the process. Then comes the military phase, where you have to decide exactly how you're going to take on Assad's forces.
No, I'm just going to say this now. Can we combine this game and the last game into one game? I think having those two things combined would be great. Like, the diplomatic phase is more like game one. The military phase is this game.
Every decision you make will feed combat strength and popular backing. If you win on the map but lose public support, the uprising collapses. It's a political needle that is extremely tricky to thread, especially as the number of dead civilians continues to rise. In his words, Thomas said that the design of the game was to force the players to notice that any tactical gains wreck the country you claim to save. He was trying to put out a message about the futility of war and the pointlessness of strategy when it all inevitably leads to more innocent lives lost. Apple flat out rejected the game, saying that it targets a real government.
No, really. And Call of Duty World at War doesn't.
The only way around it was to strip flags, militias, and even the word Syria from the game's content, leaving only the censored Endgame Eurasia, which really means absolutely nothing. But the game quickly went viral, hitting the headlines as Thomas went on a tour to justify his creation of the game. He believed that games could reach people who would never open a dense UN report or even try to understand the complexities of the region. The game was literally designed to show them that wars are futile and counterintuitive.
Yeah, it's like no difference than like a rock band putting out a song like The Clash. Rock the Casbah was kind of a call to like, hey, check out the I think it was the Muslims summer or whatever the hell. I like how these like everything's going on. It's like some people don't watch the news but they'll see a video game and play it and then go, wait a second, I might need to look into this. Especially if the game starts off with this was inspired by X.
Doesn't mean the game was not without fault, however. By December 2012, researchers had counted roughly 60,000 Syrian deaths since the first protests in Daraa the previous spring. The Free Syrian Army was fracturing, foreign fighters were arriving, and barrel bombs were already coming throughout Aleppo. But this game took all of that trauma and chaos and distilled it into a neat little loop you could play on a lunch break before going back to your cushy lives. Activists didn't like that. However,
Of course they didn't.
Thomas was right. The simulation he created in the game was accurate. Its pessimistic maths assumed a drawn-out attrition conflict long before diplomats admitted that was the case. Players chasing a quick rebel victory often found themselves locked in a grinding stalemate, which is exactly what history delivered. Ironically, a controversial video game proved more prescient than actual professional diplomats. Our icebergs always turn out more entertaining than diplomats too, so it's worth hitting that subscribe button so you can always see more. On to the next level.
I don't know. I guess like these icebergs are like kind of his things, like different levels of games. Like I said, first time ever checking out this guy. So far, I'm enjoying it.
Level 3. This War of Mine.
Again, a lot of these games I've never heard of, but if they're like PC based, that's why I didn't really play PC games.
The Polish developers at 11-Bit Studios didn't actually set out to make entertainment when they created This War of Mine in 2014.
Oh, that's a crazy statement.
They just wanted to translate something horrific into a visual medium to make people see the reality of what happened in Sarajevo between 1992 and 1996 when Bosnian Serb forces surrounded the city and turned 435,000 people into prisoners in their own homes. The game forces you to control civilians hiding in bombed-out buildings, scavenging for food and medicine while snipers wait outside ready to strike.
What's worse is I see 22 degrees Celsius. Granted, that's like, I think, right around like 50 degrees, so yeah, you're starting to get cold.
It sounds like fiction until you realize it's documenting the longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare, lasting 1,425 days. This was reality. During the actual siege, people couldn't leave their buildings because snipers hunted them specifically to maintain control.
That's extra scary because you figure if you're not, there was a 1,000, over 1,000 days, at some point you're going to run out of food. You're going to need supplies. You're just going to need something that you don't have at your house.
So when your character can only venture out at night in the game, that's because real Sarajevans like Nitzara Amatashevic spent their days hiding from rocket launchers that fired at random civilian targets. She was 17 when shrapnel tore through her leg, and she spent a month in a hospital bed without anesthesia while medical staff made life-or-death decisions based on who had better survival chances.
God damn.
That's the dark reality the game is capturing. The game forces you to make complex moral choices that mirror what real people faced. Players find themselves stealing medicine from elderly couples, watching helplessly as group members die from preventable causes, burning treasured books for warmth. Another very real story. Alma Milos, a real siege survivor, described burning everything she loved: books, shoes, furniture, first for cooking, then for heat. The game
And also, you got to figure with stuff like that, you have to figure out when you're going to burn something. Because, like, you don't burn it, like, you don't have heat at the right time.
game's utilitarian thinking emerges naturally from desperate circumstances, just as it did for actual civilians who had to prioritize survival over everything else. The siege ultimately claimed 13,952 lives, including 5,434 civilians. More than 1,000 of those were young people.
I'll say in situations like that, kids who need or who are easily accepted to like viruses and diseases, that they don't want to be, they don't understand that hey, being inside and cooped up is actually keeping them safe. Yeah, they'll be the unfortunately the first to kind of go.
Those who managed to survive walked for days through enemy territory just to reach their trapped families, never knowing if they were also going to perish along the way. The game's random duration mechanic reflects that uncertainty. Nobody knew when or if the fighting would end, and you as the player also have no idea when the game will decide to wrap itself up. You're feeling the same unrelenting psychological pressure that those real people did. The game also pushes further, demonstrating that ordinary people become capable of extraordinary cruelty when resources disappear. The developers researched first-hand accounts from survivors who described neighbors turning against neighbors, desperate raids for food, and impossible choices between helping strangers or protecting family members. It's not just...
Yeah, in situations like this, everybody's going to be like, I'm going to protect me and my family over anything else. Unless you have like a core group of people, like just using an example, like the unsubscribed guys who are all like super close and they all have like great skills in survival, everyone's just going to defend themselves.
Judging your choices, it's just presenting them as survival necessities. The game doesn't glorify anything. It's just reflecting what happens when civilization collapses and ordinary people discover what they're willing to do to see another day. Kuma War. Kuma War places players in...
Bear War? Kuma is Japanese for bear. And I see a certain asshole underneath the war.
Inside a house in Mosul, July 22nd, 2003. The screen displays satellite images, declassified military footage, and real-time intelligence briefings. You're carrying an M4 carbine through the exact building where Uday and Qusay Hussein, Saddam's children, made their final stand just weeks earlier. Yes, my friend, you are literally replaying a real-life military operation, one of many. The game operated on a twisted business model that made entertainment from headlines. Players...
Yeah, I'm not... Like I said, I want the more realism towards the game, but I still want it to have that... Like, what made Call of Duty World at War so good was they were still fictional characters based off real events, so you can be like, alright, cool. But it's like, you're just replaying real events, it's... Ooh, that's a thin line that you don't want to cross.
Paid $40 for the base game, then $10 monthly for new missions ripped directly from ongoing conflicts. Every week brought fresh carnage to digitally recreate. The elimination of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the capture of Saddam Hussein in his spider hole, pitched battles in Fallujah while American soldiers were still dying in the same streets. The company's CEO claimed they were making the headlines real, but many saw a company exploiting actual tragedies that had cost many...
Oh yeah, no, that is just a company that just said, oh, people will like to play this.
American soldiers their lives. What separated Kuma War from traditional war games was its obsessive commitment to authenticity. The developers used KH-11 satellite imagery, Pentagon declassified footage, and interviews with military advisors to recreate the killing grounds accurately. They mapped the exact furniture in Osama bin Laden's compound, included the sounds of barking dogs, and placed snipers in the precise positions where real bullets had found their targets to ensure that players were literally pulling triggers on the same people who had died in documented firefights. The Hussein brothers died on July 22, 2003, and players could reenact their elimination within months. Bin Laden was terminated on May 2, 2011, and gamers were downloading his assassination by May 7th, just 5 days later.
This really raises the question of how are these developers getting this information so quickly?
The company boasted about their crash teams that could turn real-world violence into playable content faster than news cycles could process the events. The backlash was global. Iran launched petitions demanding the removal of the Assault on Iran episode, which had generated hundreds of thousands of downloads in the country. The mission was not based on reality, depicting a hypothetical American strike on Iranian nuclear facilities, complete with strategies for delaying or destroying Iran's nuclear arms capabilities. Iranian media denounced it as psychological warfare disguised as entertainment, and they weren't entirely wrong.
Yeah, I'll say the way that these people are getting this information, it almost feels like a CIA op.
The game was turning geopolitical tensions into interactive propaganda, regardless of how you feel about
Being paid by the CIA to get pro-America. Yeah.
the targets. Players found themselves inhabiting the roles of actual soldiers in documented battles, making split-second decisions that real people had faced under fire. You could be the Marine who stormed through Sadr City, the Navy SEAL who rappelled into bin Laden's compound, or the soldier who cornered Hussein's sons in their final moments. The game demanded that players become the executioners of real people who had actually died, and that is a complicated situation. By the time the final episode launched in 2011, Kuma War had produced over 100 missions spanning multiple conflicts. Each one represented real events where real people had died, been captured, or been targeted by military action. The company had long argued that the game was educational.
Bull shit. No, this is glorifying death. And that's something we should not have be doing. Educational would be more like you have to plan out the mission yourself, and then it will run like kind of like a simulation, like the other game, where it's like, oh, you do this, this will happen. Not, hey, we pretty much recreated these assassinations. No.
But the controversies around it were too strong to overcome. It did remind us of one classic American lesson, though. Any tragedy, no matter how recent or sensitive, could be packaged and sold as digital entertainment if you move fast enough and wrapped it in the right patriotic language.
That's not even patriotic language. That's just sick individuals who want to glorify war with never actually being there.
Level 4. Verdun. Verdun opens with you handed a bolt-action rifle that
So that game does sound familiar.
takes precious seconds to reload, dropped into muddy trenches that smell of death and cordite, and told to survive what amounts to humanity's first industrialized the 1916
About to say that's why I sound familiar. It's World War I, trench warfare. God, that's...
Battle of Verdun. The game reconstructs the machinery of destruction that ground down over 700,000 men in 10 months of fighting. When you put on a gas mask in Verdun, your vision narrows to a claustrophobic slit. Your breathing becomes labored. Movement feels sluggish. This is a pretty faithful recreation of what soldiers experienced when chlorine, phosgene, or mustard gas came drifting across.
See, this is how you do it. You took real events, tragic, but real events, but you don't, you make it just random, almost random generated people.
Across no man's land. The game forces you to make the same impossible choice French and German troops faced. Keep the mask on and stumble blind through artillery barrages, or risk removing it and hope the wind doesn't shift. The real-life Battle of Verdun was designed as a killing machine. German General Erich von Falkenhayn deliberately
One, I'm impressed he's getting these names pronunciation right. 'Cause I would have been like, oh, god dang it. No, bad naming.
chose the fortress city because he knew France would defend it to the death, allowing him to bleed the French army white. His plan was total extermination, using 1,200 artillery pieces to pound French positions into lunar landscapes while minimizing.
That's a crazy freaking philosophy. Hey, I know they'll really protect this city. So we're going to keep throwing people at it to just whittle their numbers down.
German infantry losses. What emerged was industrial-scale killing, where soldiers were shredded by shells fired from miles away, never seeing their killers. Verdun the game mirrors this mechanical horror so accurately it's insane. Artillery strikes are called in by squad leaders who point at coordinates on their map, just as officers did in 1916. When those shells land, players don't just lose health points, they're torn apart, limbs scattered across the cratered ground. The system was specifically designed to represent the gruesome reality of artillery bombardments that could blow people up to bits. The game's trench warfare mechanics forced the same psychological strain that drove thousands of soldiers to shell shock.
Shell shock was they used to call PTSD. And there's the other avenue, which I don't know if he's going to touch on this with this game, which is a lot of diseases like the Spanish flu. They do believe it's from the trench warfare because you figure it's mud. It's where they have to go to the bathroom. This is also where they have to kind of dispose of, fallen soldiers and all those other things. So it's like, yeah, they weren't the cleanest little spots to be in.
In the front lines mode, teams alternate between attacking and defending, recreating the back-and-forth nature of trench warfare. When it's your turn to attack, you must leave the relative safety of your trench and cross no man's land while machine guns sweep the battlefield. The suppression system violently shakes your screen when bullets pass nearby, simulating the disorienting effect of being under fire. Historical accounts from Verdun describe similar psychological effects. Soldiers wrote of the constant artillery bombardments that never seemed to end, leaving men stunned, exhausted, and suffering from what we now recognize as severe PTSD. French troops were rotated out every few weeks to prevent complete mental breakdown, while German soldiers often remained at the front until they were killed or wounded.
I said that'll be the only upside of being the defending army, is you should be able to get more troops in and out, where if you're the attacking army, especially depending on how deep into France this city of Verdun is compared to close to Germany, Germany's not going to be able to do the same thing.
The game recreates this grinding psychological pressure through its wave response system. When you die, you don't respawn immediately, but must wait for the next wave, watching helplessly as your position is overrun. Verdun succeeds because it doesn't sensationalize the horror. Death comes suddenly and often meaninglessly, just as it did for the 700,000 casualties at...
That's like the one thing I hate about wartime shooters, like Call of Duty Battlefield. You get hit like 6-7 times then that's when your character finally dies. But in real war, you get hit in the right spot, you're just done in one shot.
The real Verdun. Players are left feeling genuinely unsettled by the game's approach to violence, which forces them to confront the mechanical, impersonal nature of industrial warfare rather than glorifying it. The game presents war as a meat grinder that consumed an entire generation of European men. Which, let's be honest...
Oh, was that not what movie is that? It's a parody... Starship Trooper. That's kind of inspired this too.
Is exactly what it is. Polot.
Sorry, had to take my headset off. My one ear is bothering me.
Kolot grabs you by the throat from the moment Sean Bean's voice hits your ears, which is basically every Sean Bean project, right?
Don't know Sean Bean or his project, so I'm gonna say sure.
But in this case, the game takes the real 1959 Dyatlov Pass incident and transforms it into something that makes
Isn't this similar to like the Donner Party events?
your skin crawl. The Dyatlov Pass incident happened exactly as the game describes it. 9 experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute went into the northern Ural Mountains in February 1959 and never came back. When search teams found their campsite...
Oh, this is the Siberia one. Oh, this is that one. Oh.
Weeks later, they discovered something that defied explanation. The tent had been cut open from the inside as if the occupants were desperate.
Oh, yeah, this is like a couple well-known hikers that knew exactly what they're doing, but like the tents were cut from like the inside. Their footprints didn't match up. There were clothes still left. So I was like, what was happening that caused these people to try to panic and get out right away?
To escape something inside their shelter. The bodies told a story that investigators couldn't piece together. Some were found barefoot in minus 40-degree weather wearing only underwear. Others had taken clothes from the dead, suggesting they survived longer than their companions, but the injuries painted the most disturbing picture. 2 bodies were missing their eyes completely. One woman, Ludmila Dubinina, had...
not mocking that. You can tell this is not AI. Because he's like, you can hear him trying to get it out. But yeah, this story is crazy.
her tongue ripped out by the root. 3 had crushing internal injuries so severe that one medical examiner compared them to car crash victims, yet their skin showed no external wounds.
Yeah, like I said, this whole incident was insane the first time I heard about it.
The game understands that these details are horrifying enough without adding too much else. When you wander through Kolot's snowy landscape following orange footprints that glow against the white ground, you know you're retracing the final moments of people who chose certain death in sub-zero conditions over whatever the hell they encountered in their tent. That choice becomes...
Or at their tent's door.
...more terrifying the longer you think about it. These were experts, people who knew mountains and survival, and they ran into guaranteed death rather than face what was behind them. Kolot amplifies this horror through what it doesn't show you. The game introduces supernatural elements that the real incident only hinted at.
Yeah, there's like theories of like, like they like, oh, did they end up too close to a Soviet secret project? Were there demons out there? Did they eat something that caused them all to super hyper hallucinate? But then that doesn't explain why they all freaked out, not just some of them.
Players encounter shadowy figures that move at the edge of vision, yellow fog that brings death, and strange lights in the sky. Now, in other games, this might feel like overkill, but these additions feel organic because the real case included similar unexplained elements. Investigators found radioactive contamination on some clothing, and witnesses reported strange lights in the area that night.
Yep. Yeah, were they too close to a secret Soviet nuclear test site? And that's where the radiation came in, and the Soviets saw them and wanted to silence them. Plausible. Unlikely, but plausible.
The final official report blamed the deaths on a compelling natural force. Language so vague it suggests investigators themselves didn't know what they'd found.
Or the investigators themselves were told by the Soviet government to shut the hell up.
Recent scientific studies suggest a delayed avalanche might account for some injuries and the panicked escape, but that doesn't explain the missing eyes and tongue, the radiation, or why experienced mountaineers would cut their way out of a tent instead of using the entrance.
The eyes could be bird. The eyes and tongue could be certain birds, to be honest. But in that freezing temperature, I don't know what bird's out there.
The game suggests that some forces operate outside natural law, and that 9 people encountered something so fundamentally wrong that death became preferable to remaining in its presence. What makes Kholat genuinely unsettling is how it treats the incident as a genuine mystery deserving investigation even 65 years later. The horror comes from understanding that this actually happened, that real families lost children to something unexplained, and that despite decades of investigation, we still don't know what drove 9 experienced hikers into the freezing night to die alone in the snow, and we likely never, ever will.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about that incident, and probably what that game really pegs on is just what happened. Because and I say this a lot to people like I watch the movie Black Phone, which is a great movie, but it's set in the 70s. There's only certain things you can explain away when you don't have the technological advances that we do in this day and age. There's certain things that can happen. Like a kid goes missing. It's as horrible as it is. We have Ring doorbells. A lot of businesses have external cameras, so it's a lot easier to track their movements. Imagine in this situation, there would probably be somebody on their phone or a satellite phone that they can go, all right, cool, what happened? I think Supernatural did that. The guy sent a video recording right before the Wendigo attacked. And I want to say that's Supernatural episode 2, but back then, you were just all right, we're going on a winter camping, hiking trip. This is the trail we're following. And these are the days that we should get there. And if you don't get there in time, then people start raising questions.
Velvet Assassin. In Velvet Assassin,
360 game. Okay. Listen, I do like the name of these games.
You play as Violet Summer, a British spy lying comatose in a French hospital bed.
Oh, God. Women spies in World War I and II were on a whole nother level.
But that's just where the horror begins. The game takes you through morphine-fueled flashbacks, each one dragging you deeper into the unthinkable butchery that defined occupied Europe. Moving through
Like I said, I get you not saying the name, but
the Warsaw Ghetto, the game becomes genuinely harrowing. Violet navigates through streets littered with furniture scattered from Jewish homes, exactly like the historical accounts from the Holocaust. The residents are being rounded up or executed while gunfire echoes in the distance. You witness the extermination taking place, but you're not there to save anyone. You're there to eliminate compromised British agents before the Gestapo can extract information from them.
Yep. That sounds extremely accurate, too. You throw a 360 game up and you have mouse controls up.
You literally watch and do nothing. The game forces you to move through Pawiak Prison, the actual Gestapo detention center where approximately 100,000 people were imprisoned during the war. About 37,000 died on the premises through execution or during detention.
That means during torture for information. That's what it really means there. And like I said, I think this game, like I said, never played it. He probably going to go a little longer about it. It's probably one of those games of showing the real horrors of war, not as much of we're trying to make a good game.
But in the game,
But then again, that will make it a good game.
You're infiltrating this real place of death to deliver cyanide to your own operative, essentially providing him with a way to end his life before facing what the Gestapo had in store. As for the German soldiers, the game takes a very uncomfortable approach to their portrayal, forcing you to explore their humanity, or what remains of it.
Oh, I thought they were going to go a different angle, how a female was able to move so freely and get in these areas with, men. Not good ones.
They talk about their girlfriends back home, their hobbies, what they want to do after the war. You read personal letters they've written to their families, then you watch them participate in civilian executions or see them casually discussing their day while people are being eliminated in the
Yeah, that's the ugly of war. Like, how many people actually want to be there and they're just, quote, following orders?
background. The game shows them as ordinary people committing monstrous acts, which mirrors historical accounts of how these events actually unfolded. They were
Yeah, like, I know there's, like, a lot of Polish and other occupied countries from the German rule back then that they just inscripted the people into the army and said, hey, you have to follow our orders or we will unalive you.
following orders, in their words. Those orders just happen to be mass killings. The final act confronts you with the Durlavanger Brigade, one of the most brutal SS units in history.
Oh, and the SS were like the super loyal to the Mustache Man. Like they were like the brown shirts before that party took over. Like
This was a real unit composed
also the brown shirts are very much like Antifa. Just saying.
of convicted
They would just go around and yell at opposition speakers. They would pretty much try to beat people up for that didn't agree with them. Instead of like, hey, let's have a conversation, they would be like, we're going to stand in the back of the lecture hall and boo you and make it so uncomfortable that you don't want to speak.
criminals and prisoners known for committing some of the worst documented war crimes. In the game, you watch them round up villagers and lock them inside a church before setting it on fire, a tactic the actual Durlavanger Brigade used repeatedly during their operations. The unit killed at least 30,000 civilians in Belarus alone, and historians note they committed more documented atrocities than any other German unit.
Yeah, these were probably the guys that signed up to the German Nationalist Socialist Party's ideas way in the beginning. So they were like all in.
Violet's character is based on the real Violet Szabo, a British-French SOE agent who was captured, repeatedly beaten, and eventually executed at Ravensbrück concentration camp. The real Szabo was subjected to months of brutal interrogation where she refused to provide information exactly as portrayed in the game's background story. Her actual execution took place when she was forced to kneel while an SS guard shot her in the back of the head. Like
Yeah, not shocked by that one.
many of the stories from the Holocaust, there is no happy ending. You might be thinking that the hospital framing around the game suggests there's something hopeful, that Violet survived, but
That could be like, the mind, like the last moment of her life, her mind went there. That could be the place that she went to not break to all the torture.
that becomes even more disturbing when you realize it's showing the actual debate that occurred around captured agents. The two men arguing over whether to keep Violet alive, surrender her to the SS, or end her life to prevent what would happen if she were captured reflects real decisions medical staff and resistance members had to make during the war. Violet saw unthinkable atrocities. Even if she survived, she'd never be able to live with that. Level 5.
Oh yes, spies, especially the female spies back then, had probably the worst, like PTSD. Like they see the worst of everything.
5. Valiant Hearts: The Great War. The inspiration for Valiant Hearts: The Great War came when developer Johan
Why does that look like Castle Crashers? I know it's about to get dark and serious, but it looks like Castle Crashers.
brought his great-grandfather's World War I letters to Ubisoft Montpellier Studios, letters his grandmother had preserved for decades. The developers read through these handwritten accounts from the trenches, and what struck them wasn't just the elegant handwriting maintained even while stuck in mud, but the stark contrast with the cold military documents that simply noted "leg lost" when describing the same man's injury. That disconnect between human experience and bureaucracy became the foundation for a game that would force players to confront the mechanical brutality of industrial warfare.
Yeah, like I said, very Castle Crashers vibe, but Yeah, the government, any government, will always dehumanize what happened. Like, oh, he was just wounded. The fact that that wound took off everything below his knee is. It's always like a hockey coach saying it's a lower body injury. It's like, well, what part of the lower body? Lower
The
body.
game doesn't shy away from the most harrowing aspects of the conflict. Players witness the first chlorine gas attack at Ypres on April 22, 1915, where 5,730 cylinders released yellow-green clouds that burned through eyes, skin, and lungs. The only defense Canadian soldiers could manage was breathing through urine-soaked handkerchiefs. Fritz Haber, the chemist who developed this weapon, watched his wife, Clara, herself a brilliant chemist and the first woman to earn a PhD in chemistry in Germany, become increasingly horrified by his work.
You hear that a lot about the people who create, like, super weapons. Like, they're like, I'm doing this to help my country, help my people. Oh, dear God, what the fuck did I do?
She called his poison gas research a sign of barbarity, corrupting the very discipline which ought to bring new insights into life. After confronting him following the Ypres attack, Clara took her own life with Haber's service pistol in protest. Haber left.
Sure. Sure she did.
For the Eastern Front the next morning to oversee gas attacks on Russian troops, apparently completely unbothered by his own wife's death. The game's most disturbing sequence occurs during the Nivelle offensive, where players control Emile as he's forced into a charge. Squad members die one by one while an officer threatens anyone who retreats with death, forcing you.
Oh, you heard that a lot. Russia and Finland, Germans in certain locations.
To literally use corpses as cover from machine gun fire. When the officer forces the last surviving soldiers forward into certain death, players as Emile must make a choice. The game gives control back just as the officer screams his threats. Most players instinctively strike the officer with their shovel only to discover they've accidentally killed him. The game immediately informs you of this fact. The historical
Yeah, that would probably be a choice that a lot of soldiers really did make. Do I want to follow this order to potentially certain unaliving, or do I want to just potentially go to prison because I obeyed this order?
Context makes this even more chilling. After the Rio Nivelle offensive, 50 mutineers were executed.
Yep, I'll say. Where's the number?
Emile faces a military tribunal and receives a death sentence despite protests from other soldiers. His final letter to his daughter Marie reveals he died believing he had failed his son-in-law Karl, never learning that Karl had actually survived. The letter, based on an actual soldier's final correspondence, expresses no regrets about his fate.
Holy crap, I didn't realize that fate was actually this guy's.
War makes men mad. Though I failed Karl, I know my sacrifice has not been in vain. The developer...
You did not fail Karl, good sir. You did the right thing, and Karl survived.
Partnered with the documentary series Apocalypse, World War I to incorporate actual photographs and footage into the game. That research ensured that every puzzle mechanic connects to a real historical event, from the famous Texas of the Marne and the roles of casualty dogs who comforted dying soldiers. The game...
Dear God. The puppies. We're too good for them. We are far too good for all the puppies.
The game forces players to participate in the machinery of destruction while maintaining the perspective of individuals caught within it, creating an experience that's simultaneously educational and deeply unsettling through its relentless focus on human cost. That dragon...
Oh, God. That dreaded C word. One, very Castle Crashers looking. It looks like a fun game, and the fact that it was based off a real guy's actual events is crazy as hell.
Cancer. That Dragon Cancer doesn't feel like a typical video game. Created by Ryan and Amy Green, this interactive experience pulls you into the raw reality of watching their real-life son Joel fight brain cancer for 4 years until his death at age 5. game forces players into scenes where they can't win.
You know how much I want to skip this because it's a kid? Is insane.
Can't save anyone, and can't escape the relentless progression of terminal illness. Joel Green was diagnosed with an atypical teratoid rhabdoid tumor when he was just 12 months old, a type of brain cancer that attacks the central nervous system. The tumors growing aggressively, often causing the skull bones to separate as they expand, creating visible changes in head shape that parents notice before any doctor visits. The game leans into these documented medical realities. Players experience a hospital room sequence where Joel cries inconsolably while connected to IV equipment pumping chemotherapy into his small body. You click around the sterile environment searching for something to...
God, I don't want to comment because it's so heartbreaking, but sad thing is this is a real reality for families. That's why, if you can, donate to places like St. Jude's. Just saying.
Comfort him, but nothing works. The game mechanics deliberately break down here, forcing you to feel the same helplessness that consumed his parents during those endless nights. The game's structure mirrors the unpredictable nature of pediatric brain cancer treatment. Scenes jump between hospital rooms, family moments, and abstract representations of the tumors themselves, depicted as thorny, dark cellular structures spreading. Throughout Joel's treatment, his parents documented his laughter, recorded his voice, and captured moments of joy between medical procedures which are incorporated into the game, creating jarring contrasts.
Oh, that's extra weird and creepy. One, it's I hope they said all proceeds from this game's gone to research. If not, and they're just literally capitalized on this, I don't like them. But they made this as an awareness and to raise money. Okay, I will like them.
Between Joel's genuine happiness and the painful reality of his declining health. Players hear him giggling while simultaneously viewing his medical equipment, reflecting the psychological torture experienced by families watching their children die slowly. The most medically disturbing aspects of the game involve scenes where players attempt to perform basic caregiving tasks that become impossible due to Joel's deteriorating condition. There are feeding sequences where he cannot swallow properly, or attempts to comfort him during procedures that cause unavoidable pain.
Joel, I know you're mad. Please stop. Please. Stop.
These gameplay elements force players to confront the physical realities of terminal illness in young children. It's extremely painful and emotionally exhausting. The interactive format forces players to participate in caregiving tasks that become increasingly futile as Joel's condition deteriorates.
God, like I said, this is just heartbreaking to listen to. Alright, pausing to help us. All the war stuff, we can kind of say, okay, it's people doing horrendous things to survive. It's war. War is hell. This one, on the other hand, is just an unseen, uncontrollable evil that we have zero control over.
You attempt to soothe his crying, but the game's programming ensures that your efforts fail after brief moments of quiet. You try to navigate hospital corridors while managing medical equipment, but the controls become less responsive as the story progresses. The game's design choices reflect these medical realities that ATRT treatments become less effective over time, requiring more invasive procedures that provide diminishing benefits while causing increasing discomfort. That Dragon Cancer succeeds as disturbing art exactly because it refuses to sanitize the experience of pediatric terminal illness. The game forces players to inhabit the psychological space of parents, watching their child's brain slowly surrender to invasive cancer cells, documenting the physical and emotional deterioration that occurs over years of failed treatments.
Okay, can we go back to the war and that style, not, kids with life-ending diseases, please? Please?
Inunaki Tunnel. Inunaki Tunnel's relentless pull
Oh god, if this is Japan, it's going to be bad.
opens with grainy VHS flicker and the promise of witnessing something real, something that bleeds over from history into the game's pulse. You step into the digital mouth of an abandoned tunnel where legend and fact intertwine.
Dun dun dun.
Beneath the hum of your camera's low battery warning lies
Oh, I always love that when you have like real equipment sound effects.
the memory of a factory worker, Umiyama Koichi, who was ambushed after refusing to hand over his car, dragged into the shadows on December 6, 1988, and subjected to horrific violence before being left to burn within these exact walls. This isn't just horror for horror's sake. The game's designer leans into the 1988 atrocity, painting every stone slab with its echo. You find scorched guardrails and signed graffiti marks that match witness reports of the spot where his clothes were found fused to the metal.
Oh. Yeah. People do horrendous things, especially when, like I said, goes back to that less than qualified technology that leads to, things people thinking they can get away with so much more because they could.
The darkness isn't just graphics. It's a living weight pressing on your shoulders, reflecting how real people once stumbled, struck by panic or pity, and drove on without helping a man creeping back toward civilization, bleeding and on fire, screaming until collapse. There's no neat exposition dump. Instead, clues drift through twisted corridors, a scorched photograph fluttering in the breeze, a charred note smeared with ink that's once bled blood.
Yeah, I think this game is more or less like how we have like urban explorers, the boys, and other people who go to like these abandoned places, and the potential horrors that they can find because people suck.
Cracked camcorder tape that skips to show a lone figure writhing in agony. Everything feels improvised, as if the game itself were cobbled together from lost police files and half-erased news clippings describing how 5 youths hoped to joyride, how their anger twisted into an act of unthinkable cruelty, and how the tunnel became a sealed crypt blocked off yet never truly silent. You wander deeper.
Also, that game style, where it's just unseen together, is probably how it really is when you go down to these tunnels with a camera. You have zero idea if there's a person down there or an animal or what happened down there. You might end up stumbling across something horrendous, which means you'll have to call the authorities.
And each step mirrors the desperation of someone racing light to find help. Puzzle pieces are strewn around like breadcrumbs leading back to that night. Rusted gasoline cans, tattered letters confessing fear of being caught, cryptic origami cranes left for the fallen factory worker, born from local folklore but drenched in blood-soaked realism. A stray dog caught in barbed wire squeals somewhere ahead, and helping it unlocks one of the game's endings, echoing rumors that someone tried to rescue a stray after the attack, only to find themselves lost in this place where laws supposedly don't apply. Visceral audio
That's extra crazy there. Like someone heard a dog barking, so they went in there and they end up getting lost and lose their life that way too.
design drives reality home. Distant whispers sound like children's laughter, though no children were involved, and the drip of water echoes like distant sobs. No jump scares pop out. Instead, dread creeps in via sustained notes as if the tunnel itself is mourning. The developer's embrace of Japanese...
Oh god, that did get me a little bit there. Oh, Japanese horror is crazy. That's why Silent Hill was so successful. It merged Japanese horror with American horror.
Ghost stories serves as a cloak for something more unsettling. Historic brutality, preserved in the mouth of a mountain that swallowed a man's life and vomited up an urban myth. The final...
Yeah, a lot of Japanese mythology is based off of like realism things, and it's creepy that way.
phone booth stands just beyond the candlelit altar of small stone statues. You dial the cops with trembling fingers, but the line scratches and shows only static. A cruel reminder that help never came for Umiyama Koichi as he raced toward rescue only to collapse in flames. Then, screens snap, you're back at the mouth of the tunnel, and cement blocks loom once more. The game ends, but the real darkness stays with you. A reminder that some horrors aren't born of fiction, but found in cracked concrete and the scorched remains of history.
Damn. Like, those are the type of games, like, granted, it's based off of real events and it sucks, but I would definitely be interested in trying that one.
Level 6. Chernobylite. The developers at
Oh. You had Chernobyl. You had to go after Chernobyl.
the Farm 51 spent over a year inside the Chernobyl exclusion zone with cameras and 3D scanners documenting every detail of humanity's most infamous nuclear wasteland.
Which we had to do. The great thing about you can scan it and then it's preserved, so you don't hopefully go there yourself like an idiot.
They photographed abandoned kindergartens where toys still scatter across floors, captured the rust patterns on a Ferris wheel that never carried passengers, and mapped radiation hotspots where Geiger counters still scream decades later. Basically, anything that looked even slightly creepy. This obsessive documentation became Chernobylite, a survival.
Well, they shouldn't add. If you want a good game that kind of... Also, a really good game that kind of gives that Chernobyl-ish feel and look, The Medium. It has nothing really to do with Chernobyl. It's supernatural based, but like the abandoned buildings, the like outskirts, like, oh, a Chernobyl-ish event happened here.
Horror game that transforms a real catastrophe into an interactive experience. Playing as Igor Kiminuk, a physicist who worked at the power plant before everything went wrong, you return to search for your missing fiancée 30 years after the disaster. The game drops you into locations that exist in reality. The developers confirmed that every place in the game has its counterpart in the actual zone. Walking through
Alright, that's cool.
Digital Pripyat is an experience of stepping through authentic recreations of apartments where families abandon their lives in hours, leaving behind photographs, children's drawings, and personal belongings now contaminated beyond recovery. The photogrammetry technique captures unsettling
That's a $5 word.
details that traditional game design couldn't possibly hope to replicate. You get the real peeling paint and the exact patterns found.
Like I said, I really wish they did stuff like this with like ancient sites like the tombs in Egypt. Just let somebody go in and just scan everything so we can actually see what we're dealing with. And then it's like, alright, cool, this is my documentation. You guys are here with me, proving I'm not touching nothing. I just want to get scans of everything, photographs of everything.
In real buildings. Vegetation grows through concrete in the precise locations where nature actually reclaims abandoned structures. The developers spent days at a time in areas where radiation levels remain dangerous, documenting decay that most people will never witness firsthand. This meticulous recreation means players experience authentic post-disaster geography rather than any Hollywoodized interpretations of nuclear catastrophe. But
That's a weird thing. Like, you look at, like, the things that happen with, like, Chernobyl, and I think 3 Mile Island here stateside, is, like, the effects of, like, a nuclear power plant going versus, like, an atomic bomb. Whereas, like, yeah, the atomic bomb is bad, but the radiation is like, evaporated immediately. These are radiations that's just leaking out, like a propane tank that you can just never turn off for an extended period of time.
Chernobylite does somewhat gamify genuine tragedy. The Chernobyl disaster killed dozens immediately and displaced hundreds of thousands permanently. The exclusion zone remains largely uninhabitable, with some areas requiring 20,000 years before safe human habitation will return. Yet here you craft weapons from radioactive materials, build bases in contaminated ruins, and treat radiation exposure as a gameplay mechanic to manage rather than a death sentence. It's
I do kind of wish in the game, if your radiation level got too high, you failed.
perhaps slightly less life or death intense, But you're still essentially playing inside a mass grave that stretches across thousands of square kilometers. Chernobylite's atmosphere succeeds because it accurately captures the zone's eerie silence. Real visitors describe
Yeah, like there are animals in that area, but not many.
the profound quiet of abandoned cities where 50,000 people once lived, and the game replicates this haunting emptiness through 3D scanned environments that make the whole thing feel uncomfortably real. But even beyond the environment, the developers didn't sanitize their source material. Radiation sickness affects your character's mental state, causing hallucinations that mirror real-life documented psychological effects on disaster survivors. So really, this is less of a game and more of a straight-up digital recreation designed to allow millions worldwide to explore spaces most will never access.
Also, I think that right there could be an extremely cool game mechanic. Like I said, if you go in there and say, hey, this is a game where you can literally free roam these impossible to get to places. Like, imagine if you had a game where you had to climb Everest and it was super detailed like that.
Because who among us would want to risk the long-term radiation poisoning? Exactly. Killbox. Killbox
I've heard this one. This one sounds familiar. At least the phrase is familiar.
forces players to confront something most video games won't.
A game about drone warfare. Oh, this is new.
Touch. The actual process of drone execution. The game is built around documented drone strikes from North Waziristan, Pakistan, where real families lived through what the game simulates. This is literally a direct digital translation of how killing happens when soldiers sit in air-conditioned rooms in Nevada, watching pixelated dots move across screens before those dots stop moving forever. The game
This could be one of those weird games that the government uses to recruit, drone pilots.
operates through a pretty cruel design. One player becomes a civilian reduced to a simple ball of color bouncing through fields, collecting white fragments that make pleasant sounds.
American workers.
And we get another commercial.
No objectives exist for you, there's no enemies or obstacles. You just get the quiet satisfaction of exploring in bright, almost childlike surroundings that deliberately evoke innocence.
Oh, you get to play as the unfortunate child whose parents may or may not be doing extreme horrors, and you unfortunately get taken out because of guilty by association, sins of the father.
Meanwhile, the second player sits in the drone pilot's chair, following commands from disembodied voices, watching the civilian through crosshairs. The pilot receives clear instructions, positive feedback for following orders, and a structured environment that makes completing the mission feel natural and inevitable. Here's where Killbox reveals its most disturbing design choice. Even if the drone pilot refuses to launch the missiles, the system automatically fires them anyway.
Yeah. 'Cause a lot of drone pilots are just surveillance. Somebody else has the keys to launch the missiles.
The autopilot kicks in. Strike happens regardless of human agency, which is the entire point. The game strips away the illusion that humans retain control over these systems once they're activated. The system is going to move whether you want to or not. The civilian player experiences the attack through overwhelming sound while the pilot watches in silence.
Oh, that's a creepy mechanic. Cool, but creepy.
Then comes the double tap, a second strike targeting anyone who rushes to help the wounded. This mirrors documented CIA tactics where rescuers and medical personnel become secondary targets.
Oh, even terrorist organizations do that. They'll attack a location to get the first responders.
Practice that international lawyers argues constitutes war crimes. The game asks
Canada's pastime besides hockey?
you to estimate casualties afterward, but there's no correct answer. It exists purely to trigger the weight of what just happened. Joseph DeLapp, the artist behind Killbox, previously spent years typing the names of every American soldier who died in Iraq into the military's own recruitment process. Now he's partnered with Scottish developers at Biome Collective to create something more viscerally disturbing. They researched actual drone strike maps where civilian victims appeared as red dots on spreadsheets, reducing them into nothing more than statistical points. The real Mamana Bibi was teaching her
That was an episode of NCIS LA, names not number. Like, he guy kept saying, like, names not numbers.
grandchildren to pick okra when 2 Hellfire missiles tore her apart in October 2012. 8-year-old Nabila found her grandmother's shoes and helped collect her body parts wrapped in cloth. The children had been standing roughly 100 feet away. Multiple investigations confirmed she posed no threat to anyone.
Just gonna leave that there. Just saying.
But the U.S. government has never even acknowledged her death. The game transforms this documented incident into its environmental backdrop. This is the very reason the game exists, to force us to confront these deaths. The Bureau of Investigative Journalism estimates that between 2004 and 2015, CIA drones killed approximately 3.
Yeah. As the Bush-Obama administrations, respectively, timeline. Not saying that those who were two separate presidents, President Bush and then President Obama.
3,926 people in North Waziristan alone, including around 960 civilians and 207 children. But these numbers remain abstractions until you're sitting in that game environment, watching colorful shapes bounce around pastoral fields, knowing exactly what's about to happen, and feeling completely powerless to prevent it. Killbox is a direct confrontation with the bureaucratic machinery that transforms human beings into targets, then into statistics, then into policy justifications for more of the same. Every round ends the same way, because that's how the system actually works. Predictably, efficiently, and without regard for whoever happens to be standing in the designated coordinates when the order comes through. The pilot will complete their mission, regardless of morals or ethics.
Oh, goddamn another commercial. That is also like the kind of like thing like I got the what am I trying to go with? Terminator effect of like you have once machines fully become like AI set and like the orders just come down, they don't care about the human aspect of it.
My Child Lebensborn. My Child Lebensborn puts players in the position of adopting Klaus or Karen, children born from relationships between Norwegian women and German soldiers during World War II. The game forces you to balance limited time and resources while watching your adopted child face relentless hatred from their community in 1951 Norway.
Oh, yeah, this is... You see, like, these kind of things happen in Norway. These kind of things happened in... probably Poland. Definitely happened in China and Japan area. Those two areas still don't like each other.
You cook meals, read bedtime stories, and try to explain why other children call them terrible names, all while managing the brutal reality that this innocent child carries the genetic legacy of an occupying force. Yes, this is a very different kind of game. The real stories behind the game are far worse than anything the developers could have invented. Paul Hansen, one of the actual Norwegian Lebensborn children, was locked away in a mental institution at the end of World War II simply because he was the son of a German soldier.
Yep, knew that was going to happen. Like I said, you do not want anyone to put the action of the Japanese into a video game.
He describes being called a Nazi brat and emphasizes that none of the war was his fault. He was just a child. Bjorn Langfelder, another survivor, recounts how a small brother and sister, 5 years old, were placed in a pigsty for 2 nights and 2 days, and then put in a tub and scrubbed down with acid till they had no skin left because we have to wash that smell off you.
Yeah. This is the horrors of the aftermath of war.
Creative producer Elin Festoy developed the game after working on a documentary about Norwegian Lebensborn children, realizing that a traditional film about old people talking about war wouldn't reach teenagers. The game
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. Like, you figure, like, anybody over, like, my age, I'm 37, so, like, 35 and up, it's like, I remember 9/11. And so I was like, I'll talk about it a lot differently than my coworkers who were born either right as 9/11 happened or after it.
became what she called a documentary game, designed to create empathy for children born of enemy soldiers. The Japanese Tamagotchi inspired the care mechanics, but instead of a simple digital pet, players nurture a complex character based on real testimonies. It's a lot harder and much, much more emotional. The Norwegian government attempted to deport these children to Germany, Brazil, and Australia, but failed.
Yeah, the Norwegian government failed the children. It's like, hey, it's not the kids' fault that, one of their parents, most likely their father, sided with the mustache man.
Leading many to be placed in mental institutions not because they had psychological problems, but because authorities believed their mothers must have been mentally deficient to have relationships with German soldiers.
Not arguing the fact that, despite the fact that some of these women were probably raped by them. Just saying.
Some perfectly healthy children were hidden away in psychiatric hospitals because Norwegians feared they would spread German genes and form a hostile fifth column. The discrimination was so thorough that many had their passports confiscated and replaced with new ones stamped unknown origin to make them more attractive for adoption. The developers worked directly with surviving Lebensborn children to ensure authenticity.
Like I said, the psychological damage after war is also crazy.
When 14-year-old boys became deeply concerned about being good parents during early testing, the team realized they had created something powerful. The game won the BAFTA award for Games Beyond Entertainment in 2019 and has been banned by Google Play in Germany, Russia, Austria, and France due to
the fact that those countries probably did the same exact thing that the Norwegians did, and it hit a little too close for comfort.
its sensitive content. The Norwegian government finally offered compensation to these children in 2008, but only £8,000 each, which many survivors called ridiculous and insulting. By then,
Oh yeah, hey, sorry, we kind of screwed up your life. Here's enough to buy yourself a car.
most were in their 60s, still carrying the weight of a childhood spent being punished for circumstances completely beyond their control. Level 7.
How many more levels are there? Like, we got 3 minutes left to go, so let's see.
Attentat 1942.
Oh, anything in the 40s, it's World War II era. And Attentat, it sounds German.
Value of having a partner is
Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Who throws you into a living archive of Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia.
Okay, I was in the right area of the world. Like I said, Czechoslovakia was like the second country Germany went after.
Dropping you straight into conversations with people who survived one of the darkest chapters in European history. Your grandfather's sudden arrest by the Gestapo, mere hours after Reinhard Heydrich's car bombing, is the mystery that pulls you into the game's cold world. You start by clicking through a grainy black and white interview with an elderly woman who trembles as she recalls the day her husband vanished. Her voice
Oh, damn, that is dark and kind of needed. You need the history lessons to kind of remember, like, hey, all these people who were just wanted to just America to go after Russia for everything's going on, they never lived through real war.
Cracks when she describes soldiers dragging people from their homes, the fear in her neighbor's eyes, the sound of boots pounding the pavement. Then, you dive into a flashback rendered as a comic strip. Your grandfather's arrest is shown in stark panels, soldiers storming the apartment, family photos torn from walls, and your character left clutching a single photograph as they haul him away. The historical footage is what makes Attentat 1942 so impossible to ignore. Flickering, grainy clips of Czechoslovak streets under curfew, crowds forced into labor details, the silent graves at Lidis. All those images.
Yeah, I'll say, I think the Czechoslovakia was a very gypsy-ish area, which the Germans did not like the gypsies any more than they liked the Jewish.
Are threaded between your detective-style interviews with survivors, all to remind you that this really happened. At every turn, you meet someone who balks at being labeled a hero. One character insists they only helped a downed parachutist because they had nowhere else to hide, and another defends collaborating with the occupiers as a desperate bid to keep food on their children's plates. Those voices jostle together in your mind, and the game waits for you to decide whether they were brave or reckless. Attentat 1942
They were just people trying to survive. That's all they were.
Simply hands you these survivors' memories and archival clips, letting the brutality speak for itself. When you nail down the truth about your grandfather, whether he played a part in the attack or was swept up in a panicked dragnet, the revelation lands very strongly, very emotionally. You've sifted through first-hand accounts, interactive flashbacks, and documentary fragments, and what you're left with is a jigsaw puzzle whose edges are stained with real tears and real loss. It hurts, man, because this project combines the interactivity of gaming with the authority of history, forcing you to acknowledge how ordinary lives were shattered in the wake of totalitarian power. And in the silence after the last survivor interview, you're left staring at the screen, forced to recognize that nothing you just witnessed was made up. Humanity is truly capable of this level of cruelty. If you want to play more disturbing icebergs, why not check out this video on the disturbing games that ruined people's lives.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I'm a fan of his content. Where's the... Hold on, we gotta... Subscribe. Did I hit the subscribe button there? Yeah, I should hit subscribe. I keep it always short. Yeah, subscribe's on. I don't like videos. It's just one of those weird habits of mine. I just don't hit the like buttons on videos. Yeah, I definitely like this style. It might be a little too drawn out. Like, I kind of wish he did part 1, which was like levels like 1 through 3, 1 through 4, the not so deep hitting personal ones levels, but very interesting video. It proves that people suck, regardless of what you think. People suck, and war is a lot darker than we realized. And a few of these, what people do to make money is kind of crazy. But that is it. That's really all I have for you today. I will be live on Twitch and Kick playing some type of video game, hopefully distracting you from, you know, the horrors of life. But that's it. Go check out Abyssal Gamer. Hopefully he's cool and let me react to his video. And if he had a shop, I would put that in the comment section as well. Because that's what I like to do. It's like, I like to plug people. I like to... wow, he joined YouTube in 06. Probably around the same time I did. Just, I like to do reactions for a couple of reasons. One, it shares the things that I like. Horror, video game. And two, it hopefully puts people onto other content creators that they may or may not have ever would have clicked on. Like, hey, you watch me react to B. Dylan Hollis, and then you discover the Fat Electrician. Or, like, you've watched the Fat Electrician and found that I do the Baseball Bat Bros. You know, a lot of different cool things. But that's it. That's all I have. I'll see you weird people later.